More than 300 new rough sleepers have been found in Nottingham since the start of the pandemic. Most have been helped into hostels or temporary homes, but outreach workers are worried that some won't actually survive. This exclusive report from our social affairs correspondent, Jeremy Ball.
How do you get into the Christmas spirit when you've hit rock bottom?
We stay in this doorway.
David's in a wheelchair, but he's been sleeping outside this pub.
Worst bit's when you get cold, you get wet to the bones and shivering and that. And with this COVID going about, there's no way of getting anywhere to get dry or anything like that. It's like some people don't understand like situations you're in. God bless you, thank you very much. Appreciate that, thank you.
The kindness of strangers is a huge help, but it's the outreach team that's taking people off the streets. Gordon's trying to find a flat for a man who's turned down a hostel place.
I'm not a drug user, but when you put me in places where there's people that are using drugs, I'm going to go down that road and my life's going to get worse. I feel like I have to ask the public for help, but then when you do ask for help, you can get in trouble for it. You get arrested and stuff like that for begging.
We can get him a small unit of accommodation where he's potentially he's going to be on his own, single occupancy, rather than a hostel accommodation. That may be better for him. The hostels aren't for everyone.
Do we know you?
Yeah.
That's why the pandemic prompted an emergency response. Most rough sleepers were offered hotel rooms when it started. The challenge now, many others have replaced them. They've identified around 320 people who are new to sleeping rough here in Nottingham since the end of March. And more of the people they're finding are on the streets for the first time.
A lot of people that we wasn't finding before were sofa surfing, but due to COVID, a lot of them got kicked out, wasn't allowed to sofa surf anymore because the families weren't allowing it. People losing their jobs, weren't able to afford the rent. Our worst fear is that people may die. Basically, on the streets, that's my worst fear.
You said you don't, mate.
The outreach teams just moved this man into supported accommodation. He ended up on the streets after leaving prison.
I just praise these guys because it took me 24 hours and I got a place. I can think about stepping on, you know what I mean, in my next stage in life, you know what I mean, getting my own place.
It was vital that we got him into some supported accommodation because he was quite unwell when he was on the street. He looks a lot better now than he's housed.
But for every success story, there's someone else who starts sleeping rough. And for Gordon and the outreach team, the work doesn't stop.
Jeremy's obviously here in the studio. I mean, what surprised, those outreaches are fantastic. What surprised them most then about the people there today?
I think, Anne, the most shocking case happened a few weeks ago. They found two teenage boys living in a car with their dad. They've had another man who refused accommodation recently because he didn't want to leave his 3 pet dogs. But there are a host of other reasons. People fleeing domestic violence. There are foreign nationals who aren't entitled to accommodation. They've had people with good jobs whose relationships have broken down. And they've even found 2 pensioners on the streets of Nottingham recently.
Oh. I mean, has there been any response from the government or anything?
Yeah, they say this pandemic has prompted unprecedented action, which includes £700 million nationally that they've spent on tackling homelessness. Now, in addition to that, they've funded 25 hotel beds in Nottingham. There's emergency accommodation too in Leicester and Derby and Mansfield. And one piece of good news tonight, remember Dave, the guy in the wheelchair? Yeah. Well, we told the outreach team we'd found him outside that pub. They've called me to say they found him somewhere to stay tonight, so always worth reporting concerns.